Before we begin, please be advised that this show may contain some adult themes that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Use your discretion. Now, on to our show. Welcome to the Sip and Saga Society, where we cover histories, mysteries, and just any story worth telling. My name is Karina, and I am your host. And joining us today, we have all of our friends back. Thank goodness. I don't like when you guys are gone. I mean, live your lives and self-care, but I like it when you're here, including you, our listener. Anyway, um, I'm so excited as always, but first, the beverages, everyone. I went with the Carolina theme, but we'll see what everybody else did. Um, Randy, what are you sipping?
Hey, so I have my standard. I've got a can of good old Dr. Pepper here and a big old glass of ice cold water. It has to be ice cold. That's the important part.
I love the quality control. Randy. I made myself a Carolina Bulldog. If you guys don't know what they are, it's basically a White Russian, so cream, espresso, and vodka, and you add Coke to it. I've never had one, but people have recommended. And
I
if you
like
guys don't,
them.
I've
You,
never had one. And I
oh,
had a Coke at home, and I had a can of White Russian, and I said, "All right, here you go, Carolina." Because if you guys didn't know, which I haven't told you, so today we're covering the founding of the Carolinas and Georgia. Yay! Okay, Greg, what are you sipping?
Well, I have a beer. It is the Equilibrium MC squared double IPA and bourbon because it's that time of the year.
yes. Also, that is a wicked cool can for the people who cannot see.
Oh yeah.
Please send me the picture because oh my gosh, Greg, the more I look at it, the more I see.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
cool.
very cool.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
You
Is it
really
good?
do find the coolest, like, cans
I
Mm-hmm.
try. I'm
every
a
time.
sucker for the label.
Yeah.
Greg is lured by a cute picture. Okay, Christina.
I'm actually following in Randy's footsteps. I also have a Dr. Pepper. And then because I'm
Wait,
still
that cup
pregnant,
is
guys,
outrageous, Christina.
that's
What
my
is it? It looks like a
hospital
beach
cup.
bear.
That is my hospital cup from the my second
Yeah, I'm
having my
like, you
second
usually
son.
see ice chips in that.
Yeah. And then I have it's just a sparkling water, but it's just a Waterloo raspberry nectarine because I'm still pregnant, so I gotta stay hydrated.
Christina, I'm still
I'm
pregnant.
still pregnant, listeners.
That's funny. So Randy and I have been scheming behind the scenes, and for the foreseeable future, most of our episodes are going to follow 1 year, and we will do a short story and a longer story of something that happened that year. So both of these events have occurred in the same year, and that's going to be the format for most of the episodes, except for our little sips, which we'll be still be doing once a month. And those will be video episodes when we start doing those again. So now it's Randy's turn. Randy, what about 1663? What did we do? Not me, but others.
Okay, so in preparation for Karina's story time, we are going to take a quick dive into an English monopoly on slavery that led to their domination of the transatlantic slave trade. So this is a focus on something called the Royal African Company. So while the distinction of establishing the slave trade lies with Portugal in 1444, England officially entered human trafficking in 1562. Founded in 1660, historians estimate that the Royal African Company shipped more souls from Africa to the Americas than any other entity. Some calculations put the number over 150,000, some over 200,000, with only 47 out of 100 making it to their final destination. So this was a mixture of people dying when they were trying to be captured, people dying in transportation, and people dying of things that happen or being killed at port, things like that. So about 47 out of every 100 made it from their home to hell, basically. So I know you're thinking, Randy, the year is 1663. Here we go again. It's just like that Little Sips episode. But 1663 is the important year here. So the original charter was for 1660, and it was for the Company of Royal Adventurers trading in Africa. King Charles II allowed the charter to monopolize British trade, focused on riches of gold and silver amongst other import items along the Gambia River in the region now known as Ghana. However, the charter was quickly amended in 1663 to include a focus on the trade of slaves when the mines failed to materialize. So basically, they did a cost analysis between 1660 and 1663 and realized that exporting slaves was pretty much equal to profit in terms of gold. So, like saying that exporting gold out of the Gambia River was the exact same as exporting slaves. Like it was a one-to-one monetary trade for them. And since the mines had failed, it was easiest just to begin stealing people instead.
I mean, that just sounds like the logical choice, I guess. The rocks didn't work out. Let's just start taking people. And
Right.
also
Yeah.
like the timing on that too. If you just find a place where you have all the resources but not the land power, and you're like, well, Portugal's been kidnapping people and it's been working out for them.
And they knew because of the incoming founding of the colonies in America, they knew that slavery was going to be needed because a lot of the slave labor that they had seen possible in the United States was in the natives, the indigenous people there, and that was dwindling a lot because of massacres and a lot of it because of public health at the time. They continued to get sick. They were continued to be given sickness, truthfully, but yeah. So they needed slaves. During this time, the British were fiercely competitive with the Dutch West India Company, and this competition incited a war between the two countries. On the brink of destruction and dissolvement, the Company of Royal Adventurers Trading was regrouped and renamed the Royal African Company in 1672. It's at this point in history that Britain becomes the primary expander of the transatlantic slave trade. At its height, the company could transport 23,000 people in 1 year and had 9 forts along the coast of West Africa. It averaged about 50,000 a year during its run, so 50,000 people transported from Africa to the Americas. And the company existed until 1731, but officially lost its monopoly in 1698, although the protection of that monopoly was actually ended in a decade previously in 1689. Um, but Parliament didn't push that through until 1698. One of the most important things to remember here is that the company only existed because of the monarchy. So King Charles II, his brother, James the Duke of York, owned a portion of the Royal African Company and served as the overseer. Slaves were branded with his mark. So slaves that were being bartered through the the royal company were the property of the monarchy, more or less. England's army and navy were utilized to establish forts along the coast of West Africa, to create trading stations, and to commandeer ships that were sailing without authorization. So, like I said, they had a complete monopoly of all British trade, all slavery. So, if any private ship went through and decided that they were going to take some slaves and make a little coin themselves, um, the Navy, basically the English Navy, would come in and would take that ship, and then the king and the company would split the profits 50-50. So whatever was on that ship, if that was taken over, um, a 50-50 split. So the king was benefiting directly from any of those seized ships. So Britain profited greatly from these schemes. The
The
monarchy
scheming and the pirating.
Yes, the scheming and the pirating. Doesn't the pirating sound so familiar?
Oops, I muted myself. It sounds too familiar,
Doesn't
Randy.
it?
Yeah.
So the monarchy personally benefited from interactions with the Royal African Company. So the charter itself stated that the king was able to join as a shareholder in any venture at any time, and was promised two-thirds ownership of any mines discovered along the Gambia River. So this was immensely profitable for the monarchy. For a well-documented example, Queen Anne was instrumental in securing a 30-year contract with Spain to transport 4,800 Africans to the Spanish colonies every year through the South Sea Company. Parliament then granted that company a monopoly on trade with the Spanish colonies. Queen Anne owned just under a quarter of shares in that company. So King Charles III, as every royal before him, so our current King Charles, has yet to make any apology for the monarchy's role in this slave trade, even though the Dutch king was able to do it a couple of summers ago. Britain's role in this covers 270 years, with 12 monarchs actively taking part in the transatlantic slave trade.
And that's a choice, correct, Randy?
Yes.
Like that's a choice that he is
Oh,
not okay.
yes. Yep, he has been
Wow.
asked on several occasions, especially after the Dutch president, um, or the Dutch king. I don't know which one it was, to be quite honest. I didn't do that much looking into it, but somebody in that land
Whoever their leader
came out and
is.
said, "We're sorry for the Dutch trading vessels." And when King Charles was asked about it, he said that he personally felt that it was awful and that slavery was awful, but he took no ownership for Britain's role in it, and instead has put forth funding for more research to be done in Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade.
So
That's
you're
pretty
saying
hilarious
he
because
needs
that's
more
like
evidence?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
said y'all gotta prove it
I was
before you
gonna
yeah,
get
say
anything
that's
out of
pretty
me.
hilarious because it's like so well documented.
Yeah.
yeah. He's like, we need more evidence. The
Well,
brands aren't enough.
literally, they branded the people.
Hmm.
Randy, when you were saying that, I was like
Hmm.
trying not to cry. I mean, to compare in this day and age, at this point, it'd be like taking a bunch of people, the people that work for Nike or Apple, and branding them and being like, I own you. Like, it's the
Hmm.
same shit. Like,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
disgusting. And he's like, I mean, I think it's not good, but until I see the numbers, I'm not gonna believe it.
Hmm.
Shut up,
Yeah,
Charles.
yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what though? That
And
I've seen
the
those
what's
videos of
amazing,
Camilla
what's
touching children, and I know everything I need to know about them.
oh
Have you seen her hold like compared to Diana? Have you
no,
seen
I
the
haven't.
TikToks where she's like holding this little like she's at a school and she's holding this little black girl by her sleeve like this?
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, what the fuck? Like that's disgusting. And she's doing that in front of like reporters, obviously, because they've
Hmm.
recorded her.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this, and it's like where they're comparing Camilla to Diana, and then in the same like little clip, like it switches to the next one where it's Diana like in Africa, working with the people, talking to the people, holding a baby. Like
And we're sure that this isn't just like a sh smear campaign or something, right? Because like everyone has a bad angle.
I would never hold a child
I
by
don't
the
know. I
sleeve
didn't
like
see the
that.
picture. That's fair. But
I'm
what
gonna
if
have
the
to
child
send you
was
the
like
video.
moving their
All
arm
I'm
and
saying
you
is
just got the sleeve? Like I've done that before. I've caught a kid's sleeve.
no, it's I don't want to actually touch you, but I want to pretend that I'm your friend.
Mm,
But it's like the worst way.
that's the
I'm gonna have to
energy
find
you're
it. I'm gonna
giving.
have to find it. But I maybe I'm biased because I like love Diana for some reason, as most people do. She is a pure soul. Randy, that's why she couldn't make it in that family. Honestly, let's be real. The man will
I
not.
will go down a conspiracy rabbit hole if we talk about this. So all I'm going
That
to
might
say
that might
is
have to be our one of our deep dive episodes. Is we're talking about Diana. I need to do. I have thought about it. I need to know more. I don't know enough.
oh, I'm so sorry, guys. We have a severe winter storm alert happening. Okay, I turned it off.
I keep forgetting it's like snowing where you are, Randy. Every time I go on Snapchat and I see your stories, and I'm like, she is in snow.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I went grocery shopping this morning, so I am completely ready to be stuck inside for 48 hours.
Oh, so you're prepared then. Oh,
No,
good.
good prepared. Sage is prepared. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Well,
Anyway, so what I was going to say was the best part of all of this is that the questions that people are asking now after King Charles said that is how did the British monarchy themselves benefit from it? And it's causing people to question whether or not they should stay the figureheads of Britain. So he's creating his own problem. I'm just gonna throw that out there because I do find that really funny.
at minimum. Okay, go on, Randy.
Okay, so one of my other fun facts that I'm gonna throw in here right now is that the life expectancy for any Royal African Company employee that worked in West Africa was only 4 to 5 years, which was even lower than the life expectancy for someone in that was put into the slave trade of 9 years. So they were living rough.
You know what? You're getting what you deserve then.
Yeah, I know. It does make me too happy. That fact made me too happy. Okay, so now that we've covered the obvious, let's talk about another less publicized impact. So there was another organization formed in 1660 with strong ties to Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade, and this is the Royal Society. For those who don't know, the Royal Society is an independent scientific academy, academy in the UK that is focused on quote unquote the benefit of humanity. Okay, so it is a chartered society of eminent academics and scientists that provides information on breakthroughs, they give guidance on policy, and they provide scholarship opportunities to scientists. They like to fund all sorts of research. It was known as the twin sister of the Royal African Company. So, as it turns out, some of the fellows of the Royal Society were members of the Royal African Company and served in managerial roles for the company. The scientists and the slave traders supported and worked together. So, documents in the Society archives show communication between the society and Cape Coast Castle. So this is one of the castles that was helped to be built by the English Army and the Navy. It was a slave hub, and the society was in constant contact with this Cape Coast Castle. Okay, it was the headquarters of England's slave trade in West Africa, and the main purpose of the communication was to collect information on diseases, medicines, poisons, and other such things. So by 1689, collections of medicinal plants, which were very hard to transport in that journey. So they were doing a lot of, they would send packages of over 40 plants trying to make sure that enough would survive the journey to make it to the Royal Society. And they sent information on their uses and other any sort of medical knowledge that was associated with the items being sent were sent to the Royal Society from the Royal African Company and were published as a part of the Society's newsletters. So, unsurprisingly, this information was not credited to any of the African experts that were divested of their knowledge. And this pillaging of African medical knowledge would continue for more than 2 centuries. So there will be times later on where I'm going to be talking about this because this is one of I want to do a big episode on this one, truthfully, because I think the pillaging of science out of Africa is insane. And it's a really important exercise for us to remember that slaves were made by England. Slaves were made by the Dutch and by the Portuguese and the Spanish. They were so much more than the slaves that a lot of people think, right? The propaganda was that they had no background. They were too stupid to do anything else. But it's really important that we take the time to remember that they were scientists and teachers and doctors and mathematicians. And they were a people group with a vast amount of knowledge before this unfortunate scar on the course of human history happened, right? So, okay, now I'm officially done.
I
Thank
was going to
you.
just say one random thing as an aside. I actually got to research at the Royal Society's archives when I was
Did
doing
you?
my dissertation
Of
in
course you
London.
did, Greg. Of
Right, I
course
know,
you
right? You
did.
mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, I've been there. So it's interesting. Robert Boyle, who you probably read about, one of the founders of the Royal Society, was in contact with John Eliot, who is probably the most famous New England missionary. I mean, part of that is because he's like ran such a good ad campaign and like wrote these relations and like accounts of what he was doing. And so he corresponded with Boyle, and so I was looking at some of their letters back and forth that are in the society's archives because they have historic items too related to like
Hmm.
the early founding and members and stuff like that.
Greg, you have been around too many old things. And I hope that you regularly cleanse yourself.
Well, the
Because,
coolest thing that I showed you all the chest from that my aunt and uncle have. The right? I sent
yes,
that.
yes. Honestly, I have a severe fear of having a haunted item in my home. So, so I'm like, the possibilities are endless if they are so old.
That's true.
I've lived in a haunted house before.
Same. That's why I
It's
don't want to do it
not
again.
fun. It's
I don't
not
want to do it
fun.
again.
Can't recommend.
The house, y'all, the house that I lived in when I used to live down the street from Christina was haunted and it was horrendous and I don't like it.
Which is crazy because I never knew it, guys, and I stayed at her house multiple times. But I'm oblivious to everything. So,
She's like, if I would have known, I wouldn't have gone over.
Wait,
yeah,
you're
I
the
was
one that
like,
survives then, Christina, like in all the in all the movies, you just walk around it.
yeah.
Anyway, I was trying to be more upbeat with my segment, so I hope you guys appreciated it. I didn't mention any of the awful, awful things that they did
I
that
didn't,
I
but I
did in fact read about.
I do think that we will have to talk about them in the next few episodes, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
we're
sure.
getting there, guys. It's
Hmm.
terrible.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the history of America doesn't, it like gets real quick to the slavery and being horrible part.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
because it,
Randy, you did a really good job. I always think
yes.
you guys do a good job. Like y'all do a very good job explaining
Mhm.
things. I know that I've told y'all like I feel like I don't know anything about nothing sometimes, but like the way that you guys explain it, it really does kind of give me personally like a wow, like it's crazy that it happened. It's not that I guess it didn't necessarily surprise me, but y'all do a very good job about explaining it very well. And I do really like the fact that you touched on the point with the whole slavery thing, um, with you saying, because like you said, we grow up or you see in the movies with the slavery that happened here, it was very, you guys aren't educated, you guys aren't smart, you guys aren't this and that and the other thing. And then, um, you touching on like no, like there was a lot more knowledge to them that was, you know, that they took from them and they didn't get credit for, and it's a lot more in depth to it than what people provided.
I think that's what makes reading some of the passages so really difficult is when you're like, because these are people who, this is like a time period where people journaled all day. Like they journaled the shit out of their lives and their voyages. And there was just like, journal entries of people saying like, oh, some of them would run and hide. Some of them would drown themselves trying to stay under the water. Some of them would like all the different ways that people were trying to evade the capture because they knew what was going to happen, and thinking about the fact that it was like the baker down the street and the city, the little village's healer, and like just like these people who had a role in their small community. And it just it's so much harder to think about it that way, but I think it's important we do.
The water, you mentioned the water, and that's like especially tragic, I think, 'cause there's been some really good research on uh, African spiritual beliefs and how drowning in particular, like the water is kind of like a conduit back to like the place of your ancestors and spiritual places and stuff. So there's actually a lot of the more you read about it and you look for it, there's lots of cases of people drowning themselves literally in like puddles in some cases, like because like that's the way that they want to go out, which is like especially heartbreaking because that's like a final way to like be reunited with your kin and your family, you know.
Well,
It's
I'm
fucked
kind of
up.
shocked you were able to put another layer of grief on that, Greg. But yeah,
It's like
that's wildly unsettling.
it is.
It is, but like I'm glad that the whole thing is horrendous and like that
Mhm.
is
But it's
the base
beautiful. I hope
energy
they
for
made
all
it
of it.
back. I
But
hope
Yeah.
they made
like,
it back.
yes, I'm glad that they were able to make that choice because I think for me, like knowing,
Yeah.
hindsight historically is 2020, right? To be able to take that into your own hands and be like, you may have taken
Yeah.
me, but you will not take me. And it's
Literally,
interesting because I read about it in my own research for
yeah.
my stuff today, where like a lot of them would jump off the boats to
Hmm.
drown in the ocean because like that was better than what they knew was coming,
Yeah.
and to know like it's not freedom, but it is like the freedom to go back home
Hmm.
when
There's a
when
book
there's no other way. Like that's
there's a really
heartbreaking.
there's a really
Sorry, Greg.
heartbreaking book that I read by a woman named Terry Snyder. Obviously, yes, there's another book. It's called The Power to Die, and it's all about that. It's about enslaved people or potentially enslaved people committing suicide and and just how like when the goal for slavery was to completely control and own somebody, suicide, like it's a really fucked up way to think about it, but suicide is literally like the ultimate act of defiance, right? And saying no, that like you don't and you won't and you never will, which is pretty heavy to think about.
And with that, we kick off Karina's segment.
It's not funny, but it's really hard. It's really
Yeah,
sad.
you need the
God,
joy.
Greg.
You need,
Well, I don't
as
know how you
Karina says, we
transition
need the levity.
from one topic to
Anyway,
the other. Yeah.
so yeah, how do you transition from suicide for freedom to this? I don't know. Well, anyway, we're going to talk about the Americas, the system that built the need for the other system. White Trash by Nancy Isenberg is one of the biggest resources. That's what I'm using as most of my timeline. But I also use PBS because we need to use the public broadcasting system because somebody isn't funding them anymore. I also read the book Black AF History by Michael Harriot. That book is hilarious, and I love that book, and I want to read it all the time, but I don't because it makes me sad. So, 1663. What did we do? King Charles, the second, I was going to say the first one, my bad. I wouldn't want to disrespect that man like that. Anyway, King Charles
No,
this
you know
also
he did something. You
they all did
know.
something terrible. They've all done something bad. They're all bad.
They're
Also,
human.
Carolina Bulldog was good. It was a good move. I was between that one and horchata for rice.
I
Rice
love
for the
White
Carolinas.
Russian, so
I also love White Russians.
hmm
That's why I was like White Russian with Coke. I knew it'd be good. So King Charles gave 8 men a colonial charter in 1663 that named them the absolute lords and proprietors of the Carolinas. So I love that. I love how he was just like, you guys just own all of it. Congrats. Nobody
actually,
asked. Imagine having that power. You just show up somewhere and be like, we just found it.
this was
Go.
actually that I found out doing my research. King Charles doing that was causing a lot of problems. Like
I
there was
love
a
that.
whole debate happening in England about monopoly versus like free trade and public allowed in business. It was a whole thing and him doing that wasn't great, but he did it a lot. He did it a lot.
That tracks
Who's
with
going
the
to stop him?
restoration though, because like he comes to the throne after the Civil War and the Cromwell period. So like some of that is like swinging his dick around, being like, I'm the king and I can do whatever I want, you know.
Oh,
Sometimes
good.
you got to swing it around, Greg. Got to do what you got to do. But also, I think showing up to a new world and just taking over is extreme. But you know what? It's because I don't have that white man audacity. I don't know what that's like. Wouldn't know. Anywho, John Locke, another audacious man. I have never heard much about John Locke, but what do we know about him, everybody?
I don't
John
know
Locke.
anything.
I mean, I mean, I study history and all I really know about him is the whole social compact stuff, like
I
his
don't know what
political
social
theory.
compact is.
Yeah, I was like, that's the only thing I remember also is
Yeah,
he did leaflets
Apparently, he
and
wrote he wrote that thing about the life, liberty, some of that stuff he
yeah,
wrote.
he was into leaflets.
He loved pamphlets. He was really into pamphlets. What do you remember about Karina? She just really loved pamphlets. I don't, it was weird, but she was really into them. Anyway, no, John Locke was one of the founding members of the Carolinas. He was one of the proprietors, but he was also the third largest stockholder of the Royal African Company, which allowed him to secure a monopoly over British slave trade. The Royal African Company. This is a little bit of my research on the Royal African Company. So, due to the growth of sugar in the Caribbean, they needed more people to work the fields. So, this was a lot of like what was driving the initial need, I feel like. And although the English didn't love the idea of enslaving people, like the people themselves didn't really love it. So, the way they got around that was to establish the Royal African Company because then it's like, okay, we're not going to do it all the time, but we're going to do it a little bit. Not everyone, but the monarchy can do it just a little bit. And yeah. And then, like Randy said, they They estimated about 5,000 slaves a year. And then by 1698, they opened the slave trade to all traders, ending the monopoly, and quickly the British became the lead in slave trafficking.
And I forgot to add this in my section, but that once they ended the monopoly, I don't want people to think that it just went like it was like trickling downward, because it did the opposite. Ending the monopoly ramped it up, and then they moved to an average of 20,000 slaves taken a year.
Well, right, because it wasn't just like six guys that could do it. It was everybody.
Right,
Everybody can do it.
exactly.
Hmm. So John Locke became the Secretary of the Council of Trade, and he never stepped on American soil, but he was a great influence on what they would end up doing in the Carolinas. Randy.
I'm sorry, that just blew my mind.
He was
He
given
never went there.
48,000 acres of Carolina land. Never went over there. Not once.
Wow, he did not have trust issues.
48,000.
He did not have. That was a man without trust issues.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he just could do whatever. This is why they have the audacity, because he's like, I just got it. I didn't even have to go. I don't even want to go into a building. Today the drive-through was going too slow, so I just didn't get what I wanted. I left. I can't even imagine just like doing nothing and getting 48,000 acres of land. That would be amazing. Could not do that. You're taking that land from somebody, John Locke. Anywho, so John Locke wrote the Fundamental Constitutions of Carolina in 1669, which granted every free man in Carolina absolute power and authority over his black slaves. Woo! He's not a good person, everyone. The Fundamental Constitutions was a manifesto. Red flag number one. Nobody with a manifesto is going to do anything great. Okay? Write that down. If there's a manifesto,
I would just like it noted
crime.
that Greg reached for the bourbon when this was brought up.
Because the word manifesto brings about stress because it means that something terrible is going to happen. Nobody good has one. Anyway, it promoted a semi-feudalistic and aristocratic society. It was the foundation for a fixed class hierarchy. Every new county of the Carolina colony was divided into 5 sections. 1/5 went to the proprietors because they need to get their cut. 1/5 went to colonial nobility, and then 3/5 went to whoever was coming in and taking the land, so untitled manor lords and freeholders. The 8 proprietors created a ruling body that they would call the Palatine Court, bougie. This court had absolute veto power over all laws, and most governing powers were left to the hands of the ground council that was run by the local nobility as well as the proprietors. So they had their fingers in every pie they could find. The council had sole authority over proposing legislation, so they controlled everything in South Carolina. The colonial parliament was the proprietors, their deputies, all the hereditary nobility, and 1 freeholder from each precinct. The Constitution made under this council made clear that power rested at the top. Every effort was made to avoid a numerous democracy. Locke worked on creating a class system in the Carolinas and even gave special names to the nobles of the colonies, such as landgraves and caciques, which they took from like different languages because they wanted to seem exotic. Every detail matters when you're trying to create order in an untamed land. And according to Nancy Isenberg, the author of White Trash, that included assigning overblown names to the ambitious men in the most rustic outpost of the British Empire. Which I thought was funny. Like, we're out here in the middle of nowhere and everyone's got these bougie fancy names because you want to feel better about yourself. You can't even survive. You don't even know how to farm. Locke also created, in his vision of the perfect society, leetmen. This was a class of servant that was ranked above slaves but below freemen. They were tied to the land or lord, but they could have kids. So then the children of leetmen would be leetmen, and they could just, create this population of peasant people that they could lease out and hire to others, but they belonged under the Lord's service.
So
And they could also
technically
be
they're under an indentured servant then, right?
mhm,
Okay.
It sounds
Okay.
like they're
like
like serfs
forever.
or
It's
something, like medieval style.
like
Mm-hmm.
a society of indentured servants. Like you're
Yeah.
never you can be inherited. Like you it's like what ends up what they do with slaves,
But
but
they
like with
can't work their
white
way
people.
out of it.
No, you are this is the class that you are. Like this is what he wanted. This is was in the plans. But I think that there is some like reports that they might have done it here and there, but it wasn't anything that stuck, obviously, because we don't have like a peasant class that stays peasant class forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, in theory, have the ability to move it up
Capitalism.
and down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how Locke wanted to deal with the poorer white population. By naming them leet men, it was it meant unemployed men that needed help. So the poor families of the Carolinas that were in the way of the colony's growth and wealth could have a permanent place to be. Before the proprietors even made it to the Carolinas, Virginia's governor had been selling land grants and like of the Carolina land. So there was already some people there, and also people were just squatting. So remember we had talked about people escaping from Jamestown, so they were in the Carolina property now. That's where they went, guys. So the poor Virginias were a threat to the colony, and the rich people were like, we're tired of the poor people being here. So they split the charter in two, creating North Carolina and South Carolina. So it was like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and there's this buffer of like swamp and poor people between the colonies.
Feels
They were
right.
like, we don't want them here.
That
They
feels
can stay.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also so confused though. How did they know there were squatters? Like, where
Because
did
they had little houses. I think they had little settlements, like
okay.
small ones.
It just seems like with a land that vast,
Well, you
you
have
would
to be close to people to get resources, though.
that's
Because it
true.
says,
That's
yeah,
true.
like,
That's true.
mm-hmm,
I wasn't counting that in. I
yeah,
forget. I forget they're not doing
they're not surviving off the
yeah.
land. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the Virginia governor had been selling the land grants and people were just squatting, and the poor Virginians were a threat to the colony. Eventually, they decided to split the colony, North Carolina, with its difficult terrain and the Virginia squatters, and South Carolina, where they could adopt all the class hierarchy they wanted and have all the slaves they wanted and have all the land and have all the rich people taking over everything. The planter and merchant class of South Carolina quickly monopolized all the wealth, land, and slaves. Shocking. And by 1700, slaves made up half the population of the southern portion of the Carolina colony. By 1714, new laws required that for every 6 slaves an owner purchased, he had to acquire one white servant to kind of keep it even. Balance. North Carolina, on the other hand, did not have a very large planter class. It was swampy land full of poor and legally landless people. They called it the Sink of America and considered it a wasteland full of useless lubbers. Despite being born with English, white, and Christian, they were still considered waste people because they weren't doing anything and they didn't own anything and they didn't want to pay taxes. Eventually, they divided the charter into three: North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And we're just kind of gonna deep dive into these and into slavery. Yay. North Carolina was a difficult terrain to navigate. It was largely wetland without any obvious routes through the forest because it's a forest. No one's been there. The people that live there know how to live there. They don't have to make a path. They called it the Dismal Swamp, which became the border between Virginia and the Carolinas. Well, South Carolina. It was an area that was difficult to navigate and it didn't have a major harbor. It was just a lot of shallow, swampy lands. Like you could get through with little boats, but you weren't going to be able to get a big ship to bring any supplies. They faced taxes so high that most Carolina residents decided to smuggle their goods. And this was the time for piracy. Everyone loves piracy, especially Greg. So much so that Blackbeard himself made his home there in the Carolinas. Wow, I didn't know that. The settlements were scattered, and the people that lived there refused to pay their land taxes, which was how the proprietors had hoped to make their money. Oops. By the seven by 1729, the proprietors sold their original grant back to the British government. Most households didn't have land servants and were mostly squatters just trying to survive. One colonist wrote, calling the land basically sand. So terrible for growing food. North Carolina had a hard first 50 years with two rebellions and a war with the Tuscarora natives. Most reports of the time describe a land full of those resistance to colonial rule. The colony was considered. Oh, go ahead, Randy.
Tuscarora.
Tuscarora. Much better than me. Yeah. North Carolina was full of people that didn't want to pay their taxes. They didn't want to listen to rules. But also, you just got a bunch of people that were already there for tax evasion, if were they not?
Yeah,
Anyway,
if memory serves me correctly, this ended up being a dumping area for like convicts, right?
yeah. Just anybody showed up. Like
Yeah.
most
Well,
reports of,
Georgia mostly, but yeah.
well, yeah, we're gonna get to Georgia. Most reports of the time describe a land full of those resistance to colonial rule, and the colony was considered full of sloth and poverty. The uncooperative climate, unhealthy diet, and overall struggle bus really created a horrible environment for survival. They contracted yaws from eating pork with symptoms that were similar to syphilis. So a lot of them lost their noses and had deformed faces and couldn't really describe a lot of, like, say a lot of things correctly. So they were just like incomprehensible. An Anglican minister reported that his white charges love their hogs more than their minister and will let them into the churches. The hogs, not the ministers. And they were just hogs in church. The governor of North Carolina, Gabriel Johnson, called his residents the meanest, most rustic, and squalid of the species. So they walked around with open sores, missing limbs, and wore cotton rags while enveloped with dirt and nastiness, is how another like historian reported this colony. And that's it. That's North Carolina. And this is very much the beginning of North Carolina. It's not like what ends up happening to them. This episode is very much just the beginnings, very basic beginnings. So now South Carolina. One of the biggest laws that John Locke came up with was Article 10. Every freeman of Carolina shall have absolute power and authority over his slaves, of what opinion or religion soever, which I think is interesting when you remember that that was one of the things is like you can't enslave a Christian person. That's why we don't do it to white people. And now they're all Christians. So anyway, white supremacy was rooted into the founding principles of South Carolina. In 1676, Thomas and Anne Drayton, a wealthy English couple who had many forced labor citrus camps in Barbados, expanded to the Ashley River right outside of Charlestown. They took a bunch of people from Africa's windward coast. Perfect. They're ready. They take their people. They are in their new giant plantation, the Magnolia, and they're like ready to go. And then they realize that the water is so brackish because they're right on the coast. It's almost impossible to grow food. They tried citrus and silkworm to no avail. So they were running out of food. They're starving. They're hungry. They're cold. They look over and they see that their enslaved people that they've taken aren't hungry because they've been growing rice. So the Drayton, yes, the Draytons are like, wow, they're eating. We should figure out how to grow this food. Up to that point, rice was mostly grown in Asia and some regions in Italy because the conditions were pretty dangerous to grow rice. It takes a lot of different levers and levees, and there's water, and there's a lot of different things that you have to that go into it. And it's also pretty dangerous because you have bugs and all the diseases that come with living in a pretty wet area. But the enslaved people were doing fine, so they knew that they were able to survive from growing that food, right? It was able to be grown in a large enough amount that they were able to live. The Draytons invested their money because they knew that this was a sustainable crop. And what they did with that money was they went to Sierra Leone and West Africa to find people that were able to cultivate rice. because they didn't know how to do it, so they needed to find more people to know how to do it. And they initially relied on getting men because they wanted the actual labor. And pretty quickly they realized that the men did not know how to grow rice because it was the women that did the farming. So they started kidnapping more women. Eventually, women would do most of the farming on the plantation, including milling and dehusking to make an edible product. By the American Revolution, the Drayton's plantation reached 1,872 acres. They had also learned that the people of Ghana and Gambia were skilled with cattle, and it became common for most people, like in South Carolina, to have 200 head of cattle. Life expectancy was low for the people that were enslaved, with the infant mortality rate being 10 times as high compared to white infants. The rice plantations had high risk of disease such as malaria and yellow fever, meaning that most slaves were bothered less on the rice plantations because the white owners weren't going to come risk their lives to grow rice. Most of North Carolina's enslaved population worked on the task system. So once they were done doing whatever tasks they were supposed to do that day, they were able to go do their own gardening, do their work on their own clothes, make their own money, and they were even able to sell like at the market. This combo of people from various regions created a new culture and a language. This collective language is known as the Gullah Geechee, and it is like all of the different regions combined together to make a same language so they could understand each other apart from their white masters. The words permeate our culture today. For example, the word tote is from the Kikongo word tota, meaning to pick up, which I thought was very cool because I like when I find out where words come from. By 1776, South Carolina was the number one exporter of rice to England, number one supplier of salted meat to the Caribbean, and had the highest income of all the colonies. Thanks to who? And by 1771, South Carolina had imported the most enslaved people from all other ports combined. 40% of this country's human cargo has come through Charleston Harbor, earning it the name slave capital of the world. Of the New World, my bad. Their language became a refuge and a tool that allowed them to communicate in front of their masters. With communication came the ability to rebel because they were able to plan without being overheard by everybody else. And until 1739, South Carolina's slave codes were based on those in Barbados, and they protected the enslaved people from the cruelties and insolences of themselves or other people, as well as their owners. But after the Stono Rebellion in 1739, everything changed. But we're gonna have to cover that next episode because we're gonna go on to Georgia now. And I like Georgia for a little bit.
Can I just say thank you so much for that because I absolutely loved the kid show, Gullah Gullah Island. It makes so much more sense now.
Mm-hmm.
It makes so much more sense now.
Yeah. It it was so interesting and it makes so much sense. Like I one of the things about doing all this research is I get so frustrated because I feel like we don't get any of it. I've never learned most of this, you know? And that's just so when you think of the sacrifice and the amount of like money that was made on the backs of people that are so unvalued, it made me so mad. Like for money,
Well, but
for stuff that you made up. Like it doesn't even, you know what I mean? Like for what?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean that does make me angry. The persistence of it though, it makes me more angry, I think. Like if you think about the ramifications of just what you talked about today. So they absolutely wipe out the fact that in Africa you had any farming whatsoever, and that's enslaved people did the majority of the farming on any plantations. Now, today, we have like what, less than 5% black farmers in the United States. I don't know that that's really that bad. It's below 10% for sure because people think that black people don't farm, they don't know how to grow, they don't know how to garden. How does that make any sense? How does that make any sense? And so they're kept from being able to do those things in banks because anyway, it it's just it just gets me so mad.
Well, and it goes back to what you said in your segment, Randy, where you were like, these people had knowledge. They obviously because without that knowledge, we would not be here today. This would not be the country it is today without that knowledge. And you know what happened to those people? They died. They died because nobody cared. And I mean, how long was the survival rate for an enslaved person?
9 years, based on my research anyway. Hmm.
And compared that to what their life would have been like at home before they were taken and the kind of life they would have lived. It's disgusting. And it's even more disgusting that we're like pretend what was it? Somebody said it was like I think it was Evan in like a few of our last episodes that it's like they teach it now as like a fun little trip. They immigrated in Texas. That's how they teach it. I think that they just like immigrated in, they just traveled on over when that's not the case. And like the sacrifice that African people gave to this country. I mean, unwillingly, they were taken, but they still, you know what I mean? Like the value is immense. And I don't think, and what we've done to people of color in this, and specifically Black people in this country is embarrassing. And anyway, sorry, I'm mad now. Let's talk about Georgia. James Edward Oglethorpe was a military adventurer who traveled to this colony in order to help establish new settlers. And honestly, for the most part, like James Oglethorpe, Georgia received its charter in 1732, and it was the last to be established before the American Revolution. It was established for two reasons. They wanted to kind of find a middle ground because we had North Carolina, who was like really sad and very poor, and South Carolina, who was like only rich people and slaves. So they were trying to find like middle ground. And they also wanted a barrier between rich South Carolina and all of these states and the Spanish in Florida. Land policies limited individual settlers to a max of 500 acres. This discouraged this large-scale plantation economy that was rampant in South Carolina. Poor settlers from England, Scotland, and other European countries were granted 50 acres of land as well as a home and a garden. Which imagine you just have to go on a boat and hope you make it, but after that you get 50 acres of land and a home and a garden?
How?
Crazy. I don't know.
Okay.
You just come over and they give it to you. I don't know. I was wondering too,
I
but
really want to know what
supposedly
that means. Like, are
you
you
get a home.
when they say garden, is this like they give you a packet of seeds?
That's what
And
I was
then
wondering
like
too. I want to look more into
Greg,
this.
surely you know this.
Yeah, Greg, how many packets of seed do you get?
I don't know about packets of seed. I mean, I think the emphasis on that though is like civilization, right? Is like from an English idea, like they're very focused on like working the land and improving the land, and that's one of the things that they use often to justify taking land from indigenous people is like, well, they're not using the land, right? They're not putting it to work the same way, like an agriculturalist in England would do that. And so I assume that that's probably like there's some loaded ideas about civilization there, right? That's like you're gonna get this land, you're gonna get the house and everything, but you're also gonna like tame the land. You're gonna live in a civilized way, is kind of how I would take that with the garden.
Yeah, I would assume so. Like you're able to survive here.
Well, there's these
Hmm.
very real fears of like if you move away from centers of civilization that you'll devolve into like barbarism and live like, yeah. So
Okay.
like yeah. So
It's giving it's giving oh my gosh, what's that movie with Tobey Maguire? I think it's Tobey
Oh,
Maguire.
Pleasantville?
Pleasantville, yeah. White picket fences, very 19. Everybody must adhere. You must have a garden.
Oh no, Oglethorpe's Georgia was very much these are the rules. You follow the rules. He was a military man. He had goals for the country, for his state. And the garden was important, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, I want to make sure the garden means food for my family, and if and the house is civilization. If everyone gets a home and a garden and 50 acres. Also, my favorite thing about this is that they're like, just 50 acres. Just. How do you measure that? That's so many. How do you work 50 acres as a family of five? I want to know.
50 acres is a family of five. It's
Well,
not
like if you
gonna
come
be
over
that
from,
hard if you have sheep or pigs or any sort of cattle whatsoever.
oh, that
You'd
is
be
true. I forgot
moving
the
them.
wildness of pigs.
Yeah. You have to, those pigs, depending on what you get, they'd be rutting every few days. You'd be moving that pin.
That is true. So 50 acres would be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, you can only have a max of 500 in Georgia, so think about the pig amount you bring
So,
over.
so a square
Mhm.
mile. You can
So
have a max of a mile of land.
that should be enough for most people. Georgia experimented with not exploiting the poor or favoring the rich. So they were real wild. They wanted to create a haven for hardworking families while building a free labor colony. It all sounds really good, except that there was no alcohol or people of color allowed because Oglethorpe thought that alcohol made you lazy, and that was the root of all terrible things. No slaves were allowed because that would starve the poor workers from work. Georgia was ruled from Parliament and overseen by a board of 20 trustees. Oglethorpe helped shape day-to-day operations in the colony. Like he was there on the ground. He believed people would do the right thing if they were led by good leaders, and he was there to lead. He shared food with those that were hungry, and he did everything to be one of the people. He was a military leader, and it showed with Savannah's layout being similar to that of a military camp, and the military drills that recruits were put through even before they made it to America. Like on the boat, he was training them. Male orphans were taught to hold a musket as soon as they were physically able to hold it. Oglethorpe wanted to order and productivity. He did all possible to avoid indentured servitude and felt that a wife and an eldest son could be enough to replace the work of slaves and servants. So he felt like Randy, where a family of five could take care of 50 acres. The colonists who were best suited for the quote unquote Georgia experiment were Swiss, German, and Scottish. Unfortunately, Oglethorpe allowed South Carolina to send over slaves to help with cutting of trees, and when he returned, he found many settlers had sold good food for rum. With the work done by someone else, it had encouraged idleness. He felt real strongly about it, y'all, and his beliefs would trickle down to both Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. They felt the same. That's why they were like anti-slavery, was because they felt that if there were slaves, that would make the white people even more lazy, which someone else is doing the work.
Yeah, I still don't know that it's the strongest argument
No,
against slavery, but it is an argument.
it's one. I mean, I'm not saying it's great, but it's better than the other ones. Many writers of the time connected slavery to discontent among poor white settlers who would rather not dirty their hands with labor. As soon as the slavery ban was adopted in Georgia, trustees started asking permission to purchase slaves. They're like, but the rules don't apply to me, right? Oglethorpe refused because it defeated the purpose of his creating that colony to relieve the distressed people, white people specifically. Many of the English settlers who came to the colonies were not farmers. They had backgrounds in cheese making, wigs, weaving, apothecaries, nobody who could cultivate soil. That's why they were all dying of hunger. Settlers were able to buy up to 500 acres and expected to employ 4 to 10 servants if they had that many acreage. They had to live on the land and could not simply own it from afar. Land would be transferred to the oldest son. Those were the rules of living in Georgia. Oglethorpe left his colony in 1743 because in 1740 he had been shot at and he didn't die. The bullet went through his wig, but after that he was like losing his love for Georgia because everyone was just insistent that they really wanted slaves. And South Carolina, like big owners were coming over to Georgia and they were like, we'll give you slaves if you put up your land as collateral. And Oglethorpe was like, no, no slavery. But then he almost got murdered and people kept trying, they kept harassing him. And he was like, all right, fine. I'm leaving. So he left in 1743. And then by 1750, the limiting land practices were lifted, alcohol was allowed, and settlers were granted the right to own slaves. Quickly, a planter elite emerged in Georgia, and free white laborers could not compete with that slaveholder class. So, yes, that's Georgia. That's what happened. Oglethorpe left, and the slaveholders moved in, and they did what they did with South Carolina. And that's where we're ending for this episode until the next one. But yeah, that's what we did. And it made me really sad to go through all of this research because of the sacrifices that were made and the knowledge we stole, guys. We took from people. It made me upset. All right, what did you guys think of it? Christina.
It's crazy how like he was trying to avoid all of that and how quickly it changed after he left. Like they were like, okay, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna which I mean, I guess per what you were saying, like his theory or like his idea, like I'm sure in his mind was like, this looks good on paper. This is gonna be great. And then yeah, after he left, they were like, no, it's not that great. Or like, you know what I mean? Like,
They
not
were
as
like,
great
but we
as you
could have
thought, I
slaves and
guess.
do better. Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I mean, like you said, because you said they were dying, right? Because like they didn't know how to like farm and stuff,
Well, they
or like they had other skills that.
hmm And he was really big on like you have to do the work yourself. And I think that was too much for some people.
Well, I was just gonna say it reminds me a lot of kind of the trajectory with Pennsylvania. I don't know if White Trash has talked about that much or if you've gotten to that, but like, William Penn has a similar sort of like, okay, like I'm gonna do this colony different where I'm gonna buy all the land from indigenous people, right? So like
Oh,
that's his so he goes over and it's like, okay, like I know other places didn't do this, but I'm gonna buy it and like he has all these plans for, how it's gonna be a haven for Quakers because he's a Quaker. And then like it kind of falls apart in terms of like his vision versus like what ends up happening. Like his sons are way shadier than him and like get involved in a bunch of like bad land deals and stuff. And so it's like the whole like it's kind of like what George is doing where with the whole anti-slavery thing, but then with like Indian relations and it also goes south like pretty quickly.
that is so sad. I love these men with big intentions and they're like, we tried really hard, but it just didn't work.
I actually love going through it. I know there's a book that I have on my reading list. I don't know the name of it. I'm sure Greg does, but
I'm sure Greg's read it.
it's
I don't
it
know.
focuses on actually how insane it was for the 12 colonies to like band together at all in general, like because of how different the founding of all of them were, how different the belief systems were. Like for it to become the United States of America is kind of like the history of that is also insane.
I would like to comment and say that whenever you all have a common enemy, it really helps unify people. We all have like a common enemy of like eight really billionaire rich people, is all I'm saying.
They don't see it.
I know, that's the unfortunate part. But also, it was stressful and it was hard, but I really enjoyed this episode and like in the sense of like I'm glad that I got to learn more about the foundation of this country and to at least be able to recognize the people that built this country. Truly built this country. Um yeah, because without them, I don't know what this world would be like. But I did tell Randy I very much mourn the life we could have had before colonization. But as always, thank you so much, our listener, for joining us on another episode of Sip and Saga Society. If you have enjoyed today's episode and would like to support our historical endeavors, please visit our website at sipandsaga.online, where we also have merch and a book club that you can come and talk to us about books and sand. Finally, yay. But also, thank you so much for listening. But bye-bye now. Goodbye.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye.
Oh, Greg remembered.